Welcome to Voices of Auntie Maeve. I'm here to share a story that changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and pride. 25 years ago, I lost my husband Richard to cancer. For 2.5 decades, I wore my grief like a second skin, raised my son alone, and convinced myself that chapter of my life was closed forever. But on the 25th anniversary of Richard's death, at a dinner meant to honor his memory, my son Brandon staged what he called an intervention. He stood up in front of 50 of our closest family and friends, pointed at the man I'd invited as my guest, and said these exact words: "Mom, we need to talk about this man who's clearly taking advantage of you." That man was Henry, and my son had no idea who he really was. Let me back up. After Richard died, I threw myself into my work as a nurse at County General Hospital. I worked double shifts, holidays, weekends, anything to avoid going home to that empty house. My son Brandon was 15 when his father passed, and I watched him grow into a man who looked just like Richard, talked like him, even laughed like him. I thought I'd done right by him, put him through law school, helped with his wedding, co-signed on his first house. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself. I was 62 years old, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed until my stomach hurt, or stayed up late talking about nothing important, or felt like someone saw me as anything other than Brandon's mother or Nurse Victoria. That changed 6 months before the anniversary dinner. I was leaving the hospital after a particularly brutal 12-hour shift when I dropped my bag in the parking lot. Everything spilled out. Wallet, keys, the photo of Richard first still carried, half a granola bar, loose change rolling under cars. I was on my knees, exhausted, and close to tears, when someone knelt beside me and started helping. "Here, let me get these," he said, his voice gentle and warm. I looked up and saw a man around my age, maybe a few years older, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was wearing a worn canvas jacket and jeans, nothing fancy. He helped me gather everything, then walked me to my car to make sure I was okay. "Long shift?" he asked. "The longest," I admitted. "Lost a patient today. Young guy, motorcycle accident, had a wife and 2 kids. "I'm sorry," he said, and the way he said it, I knew he meant it. Not the automatic sorry people give, but real empathy. We talked for 20 minutes in that parking lot. His name was Henry. He told me he was retired, liked to volunteer at different places around the city, kept himself busy. There was something calming about him, something that made me forget how tired I was. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" he asked before I drove away. "I mean, if that's not too forward. You just seem like someone I'd like to know better." I surprised myself by saying yes. That coffee turned into weekly dinners. Henry and I would meet at this little diner downtown, nothing fancy, and we'd talk for hours. He asked about my work, my life, my son. He told me about his love of books, how he spent his retirement reading and helping out at community centers. He was humble, almost to a fault. When I asked what he'd done before retiring, he just said, "Education, nothing glamorous." He never picked up the check. We always went Dutch. He drove an old Honda Civic that had seen better days. His clothes were clean but clearly not expensive, and I didn't care about any of it. For the first time in 25 years, I felt like Victoria again. Not Nurse Thompson, not Brandon's mom, just me. After 3 months, I invited Henry to my house for dinner. He brought wildflowers from the farmer's market and insisted on helping me cook. We made pasta from scratch, drank wine, and talked until 2 in the morning. When he kissed me goodnight at the door, soft and sweet and respectful, I felt something I thought had died with Richard. "I'd like to see where this goes," Henry said quietly. "If you're willing." I was willing. Brandon found out about Henry when he stopped by unannounced one Sunday and found us having breakfast together. Henry was wearing his reading glasses, working on the crossword puzzle while I made pancakes. It was domestic and comfortable and perfect. "Mom, can I talk to you?" Brandon said, his voice tight. "Alone?" We went into the living room. Henry stayed in the kitchen, probably hearing every word. "Who is that man?" Brandon demanded. "His name is Henry. We've been seeing each other for a few months." "A few months?" And you didn't tell me? I'm telling you now. Brandon's face was flushed. Mom, you can't be serious. Do you know anything about this guy? Where does he work? What does he do? How do you know he's not after your money? I felt something cold settle in my chest. What money, Brandon? I'm a retired nurse. I have my pension and the house your father left me. That's it. Exactly, the house. Dad's life insurance. Your retirement savings. Mom, you're vulnerable. It's been just you and me for so long, and now this stranger shows up. Henry is not a stranger. And I'm not vulnerable. I'm a grown woman who's chosen to spend time with someone who makes me happy. Does he make you happy? Or does he make you feel less lonely? There's a difference. That hurt. But I kept my voice steady. You should go, Brandon. I'll call you later. He left, but not before making sure Henry saw the look he gave him. A look that said, I'm watching you. Over the next few months, Brandon's hostility only grew. He'd call and casually ask if I'd loaned Henry any money. He'd drop by when he knew Henry might be there and make pointed comments about men who dated women for their assets. His wife Claire was even worse. She had this way of smiling sweetly while saying cutting things. Victoria, you look so happy, she'd say. Henry must be quite special. What did you say he did before retiring? Oh, that's right. You don't really know. I stopped inviting them over when Henry was there. It was easier that way. The 25th anniversary of Richard's death fell on a Saturday in October. I'd always spent that day alone, visiting his grave, looking at old photos. But this year, I wanted something different. I wanted to honor Richard's memory while also celebrating the fact that I'd found a reason to smile again. So I planned a dinner. Nothing huge, just 50 people, family, close friends, some of Richard's old colleagues from before he got sick. I reserved a private room at Giuseppe's, an Italian restaurant Richard had loved. I was going to give a short speech about Richard, about gratitude for the life we'd had, and about moving forward. And yes, I was going to introduce Henry. I told Brandon about the dinner a month in advance. He immediately objected. Mom, Dad's anniversary is sacred. You can't bring your boyfriend to that. Henry won't be there as my boyfriend. He'll be there as my guest. There's a difference. Really? What's the difference? The difference is that I'm not asking your permission. 2 weeks before the dinner, Brandon showed up at my house with Claire. He had this look on his face, the one he used to get before he had to argue a case in court. Determined, ready for battle. Mom, sit down. We need to have a serious conversation. I didn't sit. What's this about, Brandon? We're worried about you. Claire and I, Aunt Linda, Uncle James, we've all talked, and we think you're not thinking clearly about this Henry situation. Henry situation? Claire stepped forward, her face arranged in an expression of concern that didn't reach her eyes. Victoria, sweetheart, we just think that maybe you're rushing into things. You've been alone for so long. And sometimes when we're lonely, we make decisions that aren't in our best interest. I'm not lonely. I'm in a relationship. Brandon shook his head. With a man none of us really know. A man who conveniently appeared right when you were most vulnerable. Have you even Googled him? Because I did. And you know what I found? Nothing. No social media, no professional profiles, nothing. That's a red flag, Mom. Maybe he just values his privacy. Or maybe he's hiding something. Look, I'm not trying to hurt you, but I did some checking. I know people. And this Henry of yours, he's broke. Drives a car from Hangin-les-Tam, rents a studio apartment in that building on Maple Street, the one with the broken elevator. He's got nothing, Mom. And you're about to introduce him to everyone at Dad's memorial dinner? What's that going to look like? I felt my hands start to shake, but I kept my voice level. It's going to look like a woman who's found someone kind and decent and who treats her with respect. That's what it's going to look like. Kind and decent doesn't pay the bills. What's his end game here? You think he just likes you for your sparkling personality? That's when I asked them to leave. Brandon tried to argue, but I was done. Get out of my house, both of you. And if you can't be respectful at the dinner, don't come. Oh, we'll be there, Brandon said from the doorway. Someone has to protect you from making the biggest mistake of your life. The night of the dinner arrived. I wore the dress I'd bought for the occasion, deep blue, Richard's favorite color. Henry picked me up, and when he saw me, his face lit up. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty nice yourself," I teased. He was wearing a simple gray suit, nothing expensive, but he looked handsome and distinguished. We arrived at Giuseppe's early. The private room was perfect. Round tables, candlelight, photos of Richard that I'd provided displayed on a memory board near the entrance. People started arriving. Richard's old law partners, my former co-workers from the hospital, my sister Linda and her husband, neighbors we'd known for decades. And then Brandon and Claire arrived, and they weren't alone. They'd brought people. Brandon's law partner Marcus and his wife, Claire's parents, her sister, people who barely knew Richard, who had no real reason to be at this dinner. I saw what Brandon was doing, patting the audience, making sure he had support. I introduced Henry to people as they arrived. Most were lovely, genuinely happy to see me happy, but I could feel Brandon watching us, and I could see him pulling people aside, whispering to them. Claire was doing the same thing, her expression full of false sympathy. We sat down for dinner. I'd arranged the seating so Henry was beside me at the head table, with Brandon and Claire at the table directly in front of us. Deliberate? Maybe. I wanted my son to see that I wasn't going to hide. The meal was served. Pasta, salad, bread. Giuseppe himself came out to make sure everything was perfect. I'd known him for 30 years, since before Richard got sick. He hugged me and whispered, "I'm happy for you, Victoria. Richard would want you to be happy." I stood to give my speech after the main course. My hands were shaking a little, but I had notes. I talked about Richard, about the life we'd built, about his kindness, his humor, how much he'd loved being a father, how 25 years felt like both forever and no time at all. "But tonight isn't just about looking back," I said, my voice catching slightly. "It's also about gratitude for what I have now. For my son Brandon, who grew into a man his father would be so proud of." Brandon's face softened a little at that. "And for new blessings," I continued. "For the friends who've supported me through everything, and for the chance to feel joy again. For the kindness of good people who remind me that life isn't over at 62. I looked at Henry, who smiled at me warmly. That's when Brandon stood up. "Mom," he said loudly, "I'm sorry, but I can't let you do this." The room went silent. 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. "Brandon, sit down," I said quietly. "No, someone has to say this." He turned to address the room. "My mother is an incredible woman. She raised me alone after my father died. She worked herself to the bone to give me every opportunity. But right now, she's not thinking clearly." "Brandon, this is not the time." He cut me off. "When is the time, Mom? After you've made a huge mistake, after this man has taken advantage of you? Because that's what's happening here, and everyone's too polite to say it." Henry started to stand, but I put my hand on his arm. "Let me handle this." Brandon was on a roll now. "This man," he pointed at Henry, "shows up out of nowhere 6 months ago. He's got no money, no real job, no social media presence. He's conveniently available whenever Mom needs him, always saying the right things, always playing the perfect gentleman. And now he's here, at my father's memorial dinner, being introduced to everyone who matters in Mom's life. Can't you all see what this is?" Claire stood up beside him. "Victoria, we love you. We're just concerned. We've even brought someone who can help." She gestured to a woman sitting at their table, someone I didn't recognize. "This is Dr. Patricia Hendricks. She's a therapist who specializes in helping people who might be experiencing, well, confusion about relationships in their later years." The room erupted in whispers. I felt heat rising to my face, but it wasn't embarrassment, it was rage. "You brought a therapist? To ambush me at a dinner honoring your father's memory?" "We're not ambushing you," Brandon said. "We're trying to help you before you make a decision you can't take back. Before you give this man access to everything, Dad worked so hard to leave you." That's when Henry finally stood. He'd been quiet through all of this, but now he faced Brandon directly. His voice was calm, but firm. "Young man, I understand you're trying to protect your mother. That's admirable. But you don't know me. And you've made no effort to. You've looked at my car, my apartment, my lack of social media presence, and you've created a story about who I am and what I want. Would you like to know the truth? Please enlighten us, Brandon said sarcastically. I don't have social media because I value privacy. I drive an old car because it runs well and I see no reason to replace it. I live in a small apartment because I don't need much space. I dress simply because expensive clothes have never interested me. And I'm here tonight because your mother invited me, and I care about her deeply. That's exactly what a con man would say, Claire interjected. Henry turned to her. What would convince you otherwise? Would you like to see my bank statements? My credit report? A background check? Actually, yes, Brandon said. I would. Brandon, that's enough, I said, standing up. My voice was shaking but strong. You've embarrassed me, embarrassed Henry, and insulted everyone here by implying they can't see through some imaginary scheme. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to respect me. I can't respect a decision that's going to destroy your life. Before I could respond, something unexpected happened. A woman stood up from one of the tables near the back. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair and glasses. She looked at Henry with tears in her eyes. Excuse me, she said. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to say something. She walked toward our table, and I noticed she was shaking. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a surgeon at County General, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the man you're all accusing of being a con artist. The room went completely silent. She looked at Henry. I don't know if you remember me, Professor. It was 12 years ago. I was a pre-med student working 2 jobs to pay tuition. My dad had just died, and I was about to drop out because I couldn't afford to continue. One day, I got a letter saying I'd been selected for the Henderson Scholarship, full tuition, books, stipend for living expenses. I called the number on the letter to thank whoever had created it, but I was told the donor wished to remain anonymous. Henry's face had gone very still. Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. It took me years to figure out who it was. The clues were there. The scholarship was administered through the university where you'd taught. The selection criteria matched exactly with the advice you'd given me in office hours. And when I finally tracked down someone who would tell me the truth, they said you'd funded 27 full scholarships over the years, 27 students who otherwise couldn't afford medical school. Another person stood up, a man in his 40s, also at a back table. I was one of them too, he said. The Henderson Scholarship put me through pharmacy school. I'm Marcus Johnson. I own 3 pharmacies now. I've been trying to find you for years, to say thank you. Then another person stood, and another. 5 people in that room, it turned out, were former students of Henry's, students he'd put through school anonymously. They'd heard about the dinner from Sarah, who'd heard about it from someone at the hospital where I used to work. They'd come to honor Richard's memory because I'd been kind to them during their clinical rotations, but when they'd seen Henry in the room, they'd recognized him. Professor Whitmore, Sarah said, using a name I'd never heard, retired 7 years ago after 40 years teaching at the university. He never made a lot of money, but everything he saved, he put toward helping students who reminded him of himself. Students from poor families who had the grades, but not the resources. I turned to Henry, stunned. Professor Whitmore? He looked almost embarrassed. I published under my full name, Henry James Whitmore, but I've always gone by Henry. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's not important. I don't do that work for recognition. I do it because I remember what it's like to be young and struggling and having someone give you a chance. Sarah wasn't done. Professor, you should also know that the university has been trying to reach you. They want to name the new scholarship hall after you, the Henderson Whitmore Center, because even after you retired, you kept contributing. You sold your house, moved to that small apartment, and put everything toward the endowment. The room was completely silent except for the sound of someone crying. It was my sister Linda. Brandon was pale. I didn't know. Another voice spoke up. This time it was Giuseppe, the restaurant owner. He'd been standing near the kitchen door, listening. Professor Whitmore, he said, his Italian accent thick with emotion. I think these people should also know that you are the reason this restaurant is still here. When my son got sick 5 years ago, when the medical bills were crushing us, when we were about to lose everything, someone paid the bills. Anonymous. The hospital told me it was a benefactor. I found out later it was you." Henry closed his eyes briefly. "And the literacy program at the community center," another voice added. "An older black woman I recognized from my neighborhood. You're the one funding that. My grandson learned to read because of your program." More people started speaking. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd lived modestly, saved obsessively, and given away almost everything he had to help others. The old car, the small apartment, the simple clothes. They weren't signs of poverty. They were choices. Choices made by someone who believed that purpose mattered more than possessions. I looked at my son. His face had gone from red to white. Claire was crying, but not the pretty kind of crying, the ugly, ashamed kind. "Brandon," I said quietly, "I think you owe Henry an apology." But before Brandon could say anything, Henry spoke. "Victoria, I need to tell you something, and I should have told you before." He took my hand. "I didn't tell you about any of this, because I didn't want it to matter. I wanted you to know me as Henry, just Henry, the man who helps you carry your groceries, the man who brings you wildflowers and does crossword puzzles at your kitchen table, not Professor Whitmore with his scholarships and his philanthropy. I was afraid that if you knew, it would change things between us." "It does change things," I said, and his face fell. "It makes me even more certain that you're the best man I've met in 25 years. I turned back to Brandon. "Your father would be disappointed in you tonight, not because you wanted to protect me, but because you forgot what he taught you, to look beyond the surface. To judge people by their character, not their bank accounts, or their cars, or their apartments." Brandon opened his mouth, closed it. Finally he said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I thought, "I was trying to." "You were trying to control something you couldn't stand seeing change. But Brandon, I'm not betraying your father's memory by moving forward with my life. I'm honoring it. Your father told me, right before he died, that he wanted me to be happy. He made me promise that I wouldn't stop living just because he was gone." Claire pulled on Brandon's arm, trying to get him to leave, but he shook her off. He walked slowly toward Henry, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry, sir. I judged you without knowing you. I accused you of things that were completely wrong. I embarrassed my mother and made a fool of myself. There's no excuse for what I did." Henry extended his hand. "There's always an excuse for a son trying to protect his mother. You just went about it the wrong way." Apology accepted. But Brandon didn't take his hand. "No, I don't deserve that yet." He looked at me. "Mom, I need to leave. I need to think about what I did here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He left, Claire following behind him, along with the people they'd brought. The therapist they'd hired looked mortified and apologized profusely before hurrying out. After they left, the dinner continued, but the mood had shifted. It became a celebration, not just of Richard's memory, but of the kind of love that looks past surfaces, that builds slowly and genuinely. Henry's former students stayed late, sharing stories about his teaching, his mentorship, his quiet acts of kindness that had changed their lives. One of them pulled me aside. "Mrs. Thompson, Professor Whitmore never talks about himself, but you should know something else. When the university tried to give him awards, honorary degrees, any kind of recognition, he always refused. The only thing he ever asked for was that the scholarship program continue after he was gone. He set up a trust, an actual trust, with lawyers and everything. That's where most of his money is, making sure kids like us get chances we wouldn't have otherwise." I didn't hear from Brandon for 3 weeks after that dinner. Then one morning he showed up at my door. He looked terrible, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat in the living room, the same room where he'd confronted me about Henry months before. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "I've been doing some thinking about why I reacted the way I did. And I realized something. I wasn't protecting you from Henry. I was protecting myself." "From what?" "From losing you." Mom, after Dad died, it was just us, you and me, against the world. And somewhere in my head, I started thinking that if you found someone else, I'd lose that. Lose you. It was selfish and stupid and completely unfair to you. Brandon, let me finish, please. He took a shaky breath. I also realized something else. Claire and I have been having problems, money problems. I made some bad investments, took some cases that didn't pan out. We've got debt, a lot of it. And I think part of me was counting on, God, this is awful to say out loud. Part of me was counting on eventually having access to your resources, the house, your savings. And when Henry showed up, I panicked because I thought he'd get to them first. I felt my heart break a little. Oh, Brandon. I know. It's disgusting. I'm disgusted with myself. Dad would be ashamed of me. Hell, I'm ashamed of me. Tears were running down his face now. I turned into exactly the kind of person Dad always warned me not to become. Someone who measures worth in money. Someone who sees people as resources instead of human beings. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. Claire wants me to file for bankruptcy. But that feels like taking the easy way out. I need to fix this myself. Take responsibility. He looked at me directly. I'm not asking you for money. I need you to know that. Whatever happens with me and Claire, with my career, with everything, I'm not going to ask you to bail me out. I don't deserve your help after what I did. Everyone deserves help, Brandon. But sometimes, help means letting someone struggle through their own consequences instead of rescuing them. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I know. And I know I need to apologize to Henry properly, face to face, if he'll even see me. Henry did see him. They met for coffee, just the two of them. I don't know everything they talked about, but when Brandon came over afterward, he seemed lighter somehow. He's a good man, Mom. A really good man. And I think you and he are good together. I'm happy for you. Genuinely happy. Things didn't magically fix themselves overnight. Brandon and Claire ended up separating. He had to sell the house, downsize his life significantly. But something interesting happened. Through Henry's network, Brandon started doing pro bono legal work for nonprofits. He helped families fighting medical debt. He worked with veterans navigating disability claims. He wasn't making much money, but he seemed more alive than I'd seen him in years. One day, about 6 months after the disastrous dinner, Brandon called me. Mom, I got a job offer. It's with a legal aid organization. The pay is about half what I was making before, but the work is meaningful. I'd be helping people who really need it. What does your heart tell you to do? That this is what Dad would have done. Then I think you have your answer. He took the job. He moved into a smaller apartment. He started volunteering at the literacy program Henry funded. He and Claire tried couples counseling, and eventually, slowly, they started rebuilding their relationship on a foundation that wasn't about status or money or image. As for Henry and me, we're taking things slow. He asked me to move in with him, but I said not yet. I like having my own space, and I like the anticipation of seeing him. We've got time. For the first time in 25 years, I've got time and I'm not afraid to use it. Last month, the university held a ceremony to dedicate the Henderson Whitmore Scholarship Center. Henry tried to refuse to attend, but his former students basically kidnapped him and brought him there. They'd raised an additional $1 million for the endowment in his honor. When he stood to speak, he could barely get words out. I was a poor kid from nowhere, he said finally. I had a teacher who believed in me when nobody else did. She paid for my books one semester when I couldn't afford them. It was $23. $23 changed my life, so I decided that if I ever had $23 to spare, I'd pass it on. I just kept passing it on. I watched him from the audience. This humble man who'd chosen purpose over prestige, and I thought about the different kinds of wealth in this world. Brandon was there too, and afterward he shook Henry's hand and said, "Thank you for teaching me what I should have learned a long time ago." "What's that?" Henry asked. "That the best things in life can't be measured by their price tags. I still visit Richard's grave every year on our anniversary. I bring flowers and tell him about my life, about Henry, about Brandon's transformation, about the scholarship students I've met who've gone on to do incredible things. I like to think Richard knows. I like to think he approves. Because love isn't about replacing what you've lost. It's about honoring what you had while making room for what comes next. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, what comes next is a man in a worn canvas jacket who'll help you pick up the pieces you've dropped and walk beside you as you put them back together. Not because he wants something from you, but because he sees you, really sees you, and thinks you're worth his time, his kindness, his $23 that he could have spent on himself but chose to spend on making the world a little bit better instead. That's the kind of wealth that matters. That's the kind of love that lasts.